What was the worst fight you ever had?
Amber called me an asshole, and I hadn't included her in streaming content for Art 101. We both love Mr. Burgher's Art 101 videos, content, probably the best teacher in my estimation, and I wrote it in blood in the shower so she would remember.
And is that what we see right here?
Yes.
Art 101 with Mr. Burgher.
Scholars, welcome back to Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher. Professional artist, master educator. I'm attempting to provide you with the best in our historical knowledge today at the Speed Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. This is part 2 of 2. There was just so much stuff to see. I couldn't imagine to fit it all in one video. So here's a second look. So again, this is my second of 2 videos about the Speed Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. If you haven't seen the other, I recommend you go checking that out either before or after. It really doesn't matter the sequence, but just know that there are 2 videos in this series on the Speed Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. Anyway, I'm going to start talking about these artworks from the oldest to the most contemporary. So I want to go to the oldest piece of work in the museum itself. This is a Predynastic Egyptian piece of pottery, which is a black-top jar from 4000 to 3200 BC. So this thing is crazy old. And this earthenware vessel was a part of everyday life in ancient Egypt. These were containers that were used for food, but also used to place objects and food and all kinds of things, and they would leave these things at burial sites for their ancestors to have in the afterlife. The decoration is done in a red slip, and the black carbonation on the top is from the firing itself. Moving forward a couple thousand years, we go to this work. Roldana was an artist who carved this Mary Magdalene back in 1695. She was a Spanish Baroque artist who maintained her own studio at a time when females were not in the game at all. She would use symbols like the skull, which reminds us that Mary Magdalene was a witness to Christ's death, and a crucifix or scourge or other sorts of symbols around the death of Christ. Some of these things are omitted, but look at her hands. It is believed that these were sculpted in order to hold things like a cross and scourge at one time. And strategically placed right behind this work is a work by Matthew Harris Jouett, who painted Dead Christ Mourned, or the Three Marys in 1824. Now, Jouett was primarily known as a portrait painter living in Kentucky. His father was a hero of the American Revolution and wanted his son to go off and study law, but turned his attention to painting. His father was quoted to have said, "I sent Matthew to college to make a gentleman of him, and he turned out to be nothing but a damned sign painter." Although from Kentucky, he found his greatest successes by presenting at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. Now, what is the subject matter of this particular painting? Well, it's a copy. He took a composition that already was presented by one of the founders of the Baroque style, who was living and working in Italy by the name of Annibale Carracci, whose name has been lost in time a little bit, but his influence in creating what is known as the Baroque style cannot go without recognition.
I could tell you what was coming down in there. You didn't tell me shit.
The Three Shades was a sculpture that was put together sometime before 1885 and cast between 1969 and 1997 by the great Impressionist sculptor Auguste Rodin. Now, this particular work is an enlargement of a grouping of the three shades that stood atop his Gates of Hell sculpture. These souls of the damned point down to his message on the gate, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And over his career, he worked on several versions and variations of this design. And this particular work is on loan to the Speed Museum for a short period of time, so it may or may not be here when you come to visit.
What a crock of shit.
Totally.
But here is a work that is owned by the Speed Museum. It is a cover to Old Tales from 1893 by Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. This lithograph is a caricature of poet Jean-Paul de Zecchi, who was presented by Toulouse-Lautrec's cousin and balloonist Desiree Dayu. Now this was the title page for Dayu's Book of Songs, and we see in the background the 4-year-old Eiffel Tower, which was kind of a symbol of the fusion of the new Paris with the old Paris.
Oh, Christ alive.
I will astonish Paris with an apple. Now this is a quote by famed post-impressionist Paul Cezanne, and this work, Two Apples from 1895-1900, was an example of this sort of idea that he had of taking on the art world. He would take a subject matter like an apple and view it from many different positions. In this way, Cezanne would very much influence the future artists like Braque and Picasso as they would develop Cubism.
Let's have another one. Maybe he lives. Soup right there.
Another work that is on loan to the Speed Museum during my visit is this work, Nymphias by Claude Monet, a painting that was created in 1897-1899. Now for the roots of this work, we've got to go all the way back to 1893 when he and his family moved to his home in Giverny, where he built a lily pond and surrounding gardens. Now this would have been one of his first works that he would have created at that pond as it began to mature and grow with the plant life and all those other sorts of things. And he would go on to become quite famous and very well known for his paintings in that area and in his gardens.
I was just, we were talking about Claude Monet, and I just wanted to say that, what I liked about him was his paintings.
The Yoruba peoples of Nigeria created this Gelede mask from the mid-20th century. And this is a mask that would have been worn to represent Yoruba women. With this mask, there would have been a whole costume as well as a dance that would have been presented to honor the powerful women of the Yoruba community. This is a celebration of the mothers that included the ancestors, the deities, as well as the living, and very much a collective of people that had high respect for the women in their community.
Who's your friend?
This is a Lakota Sioux eagle feather bonnet that would have been created somewhere between 1900 and 1925. This would have been an item worn by warriors and leaders to symbolize their bravery, their war honors, and also used to summon the supernatural powers of their ancestors. This is a very powerful symbol by the Lakota and many Native American groups.
Yeah, it looks pretty sweet. It looks awesome.
Henry Moore is a British sculptor who created this work, reclining figure Angels, in 1979. Usually he doesn't do a whole lot with classical sculpture, but in this one it very much is a reference to the classical sculpture and presenting that in a modern sort of surrealist fashion. This quintessential 21st century sculptor helped influence surrealism through his sculptures by creating biomorphic forms that very much resonated with a lot of people, and these reclining figures are absolutely fantastic.
I just want to lie on the beach and eat hot dogs.
Number 11 on the list, 11 out of 11, here we go. Karen LaMonte, we saw her previously in Cincinnati, but this time Odoraiku, that is a cast glass sculpture from 2013. As she says, these are a social skin that she's presenting. These relay a culturally defined message. This particular work is a traditional Japanese kimono that very much speaks about one's place in society rather than who the specific person is. You know, it kind of goes back to that old adage, do you wear the suit or does the suit wear you? You know, it's like a social standing, social commentary that's very much a thought-provoking sort of idea by LaMonte in this series of works that I've seen a couple of now. Very thought-provoking.
I'm sorry, I don't speak Japanese.
But anytime you go to the museum, you're bound to get thoughts about different things and different ideas. I highly recommend you coming out. And as always, there are works that are on loan, there are works that are being loaned. You never know what you're going to find at the museum when you go. So just go with an open mind, enjoy the experience, see what you see, and go along for the ride and just enjoy your time anytime you get to one of these museums. And I highly recommend checking out the Speed Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a great experience. Scholars, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you're here in Louisville, I recommend a stop. Have a great day out there.
System error.